Okay, then. Shall I just present you then?
Sure, if you like,
I'm
yeah.
presenting you. Be able to just put your
Let's switch
page up now.
I'm gonna switch it to a screen share so you don't have to check out my beard so much.
Everybody in the chat room, so Chris is just getting ready to put something up for us to see, so it'll just take a couple of minutes, and then I'm saying goodbye. I'm saying hello to everybody in the chat room. Coming up, Stan. Oh, Stan! Oh, Stan.
Let's try it this way here if I can.
Christy. Just bear with us, everybody, while Chris does this.
So I just brought up an article here. It's actually from 2012, but there's still articles, newer ones in this. And when I checked Wikipedia, this one's about, it's in the Siberian Times, but it's about a crater. It's called Patamovsky Crater in the, I can't say it's Russian, but Irkutsk region. And there's a whole write-up on this particular crater, and you can kind of see in the first picture there, it's more of a mound than it is a crater. It's quite a large one when viewed from the air. And I thought it was really interesting because it's got basically a huge crater of limestone rubble, and you can see it's probably 100 or more feet high, because these are trees, right? Full-grown trees, so it's a couple hundred feet high, and it's got this perfect raised dome in the middle with this pile of rubble around it. And so I started comparing that to some other pictures here. So this search, just so you can see how I'm kind of doing it, I just went electric universe, geology, arc strike as keywords, and brought up some similar pictures of formations, because there was a few questions where people were asking where some of them are raised rather than the hole, and some of them are raised up, and that has to do with the polarity change. And this picture here is a good example. So these were laboratory experiments done by Dr. C.J. Ransom, and what he did is he took various powders of different elements, like, some were lime powder, and some were talc, and some were, clay and dirt and metal and everything else. And then he just zapped them with electric charges. And you can see that, especially the first 3 or 4 there, look exactly like that crater does. So you have the ring on the outside and then the raised dome in the middle. And it creates a perfect crater. It looks exactly like that one in Russia. Right here. And then I saw that I checked out what the stone actually was. It's a limestone, so it's a dielectric. It's not like iron, so it's a negative type of ionization that happened here. And it pulled all this stone right out of the ground and then fractured it in a single spot. So then what I did is looked at it in a little more detail. There's some interesting things that I noticed in this article when I read through it. One is that they think it was, the main theory, what they think caused it, they're still saying, it's part of a Tunguska meteoroid that exploded over the Tunguska region, but there was never any meteoroids found. Like, they never found any evidence of an actual meteor remains in either location in 1908. But this one here was dated about 400 years before that, when they took cores of the trees. And there's some trees there's no trees that grow on top of the crater, but there's trees around the base of it. And they found some of the trees were, I think, 480 years old, according to the article, roughly. But the interesting part about the trees is that the trees that started growing initially after the strike, grew at a rate twice as fast as the surrounding trees, and further away from the strike, they grew twice as fast as any other tree in that region. For the first 40 years of their life, their growth rings were twice as large as anything else in that area. So I thought that tied well in with Ken Wheeler's. Ken Wheeler's done some work on that too, where he put plants in a negative field and plants in a positive field, like magnets underneath the plants. One was positive, one was negative, and the plant that's negative grew twice as fast as the one that was positive. So I think that's probably the reason why the trees grew so fast after the strike. So it's a fascinating little article. And then to kind of back it up with what we were talking about before, other than just the shape of it, I went to this is the Wikipedia article on it. And so it seems that it's interesting, because when science, mainstream science, fails to come up with a logical explanation, they first say it's a meteor, but then they can't prove it's a meteor. They come up with a theory that it was some sort of a UFO that was shaped like a cylinder. So they think that there's a UFO that was a cylinder that hit the ground and then went into the ground and kind of vanished because it was more dense, and it sunk into the ground, left this mound of rock behind it. So they think there's a UFO underneath it, right? So they default to the UFO theory,
which they want to do, don't they? Which they want to do. They'll want to take you there. And takes you away from it.
If they find these, takes you away from the truth, right? But they don't want to say, it was an electric strike, right? And then I'm going to switch screens here because I want to show you how I kind of know that it was electric, and the proof that it was electric. I'm going to switch and share this other screen here real quick, if I can.
The dreaded change, Chris.
Yeah, got to get it down to a science. So I'm just going to jump back to the Google Earth ball thing again, because it's the quickest way to show this stuff. Okay, so I went to Google.
Like using it. It's just it's the easiest way to show things on a Hangout, isn't it? When you've got all these windows open and stuff. Anyway, carry on, Chris.
Yeah, if I had a real map that had all the detail on it and all the layers, if you could zoom right into the crater, I would use that for sure. This one's not very accurate when you're trying to measure degrees. It doesn't work. So there's a crater on Google Earth. You can see it from the top on the pin. So naturally I go, okay, so if this is one of the poles, there's got to be another pole that matches it in basic size, shape, and it can't be that far away within reason. And this is a fairly small crater, so this is quite localized. So it's not like it's a secondary hit, right? This happened within the last 500 or 600 years, so it's pretty small, really, when you think about it. But it still has a matching negative. You go over to this side, and I found the opposite pole, and the opposite pole is a perfect spherical lake. It's been filled in with water, and it looks like a negative. Now this one's interesting because I think it's actually a double negative. I haven't really seen that many of those, which is why this one.
What's a double negative then?
Because this one, this one here is like, so this is definitely had negative. It looks like it had negative polarity because there's no iron in it, so there's no positive magnetic materials really, because limestone's kind of a dielectric. It's diamagnetic. It's not overly magnetic. It's not like ferrous iron or magnetite or anything of that type of iron ore type of material. So it's more like salt, right? It's more like limestone's more like a salt dielectric. And that's why it has this, it doesn't have those features. It has more of a rounded feature. So it's probably almost deep underground, and there might be pockets where this is kind of semi-hollow. more like probably what the moon is made out of. And then this one here is also negative, right? But it matches it in size and scale, and it's about 6 kilometers away, and it's the closest strike to that area. But it's also negative, so which is interesting because it's when you try to put the electrics together. If you had an imbalance, like an imbalance or it's out of phase, like an imbalance in charge, then it's still arced out. So you would have had a negative field that arced out to another negative field, but one was stronger than the other, and it made a circuit temporarily. Yeah. Which is I find that part kind of fascinating, because most of the ones that we look at, you'll find a positive pole with the iron, and then a negative pole somewhere handy that's not iron. It's something more dielectric, like lime or basalt rock.
Is that quite a close strike? Because sometimes they're miles apart, aren't they? That's
yeah, 6 kilometers is pretty close and pretty small. And like I said, this isn't an epicenter of a more larger mega strike. I think this one happened quite recently, which caused me to believe, like we were saying, that the really, really big ones that caused all the cataclysms in the past and ripped up the cities and threw down the balls and all that stuff we've been looking at. This one is a lot smaller, so this is within the last 500 or 600 years.
I think that's a man-made one with them playing and testing and seeing what they can do, or do you think it's more a natural one?
No, I think it's still natural. It's these once the region is hit once, so you can see that in the past there was a really large one that happened a long time ago, and once it's charged, if you look at what they call, it's not a magnet, it's I think they call them electrics, I think is how you spell it. But you can charge, like if you take a nylon ring or a nylon washer or something that's nylon and apply a static charge to it, even just something small like a cap off of a water bottle, and you apply a high voltage charge to it, the charge can last for weeks. It'll stay charged, and it'll stay charged in the kilovolt range, like 10,000 volts and you'll get a shock from it, like a little zap off it, right? But it's high voltage, low amperage. And I think this is what happens here too, is once the first strike hits, it kind of charges out. You get the rapid growth of trees and grass and water comes to the surface, and it takes, so as the regrowth happens, the trees are consuming the charge. So over hundreds, thousands of years, the charge just starts to kind of come down. And then, so the next strike that hit, it was just a small one, just a little tiny one, because it didn't have as much charge on the ground. Because really the ground could only bring down roughly what it has in it to make contact with what's above, because the two charges kind of have to balance in phase to make the connection. Yeah. So I thought that one was kind of...
You found a new one, you mean? Yeah, because you found a new one.
Yeah, I like it when I find these new ones. Like, I haven't seen this one before, and I like it when they make the news, because people like, Tunguska Crater's a famous one.
Just changing the subject a tiny bit, Chris. I was just wondering what you thought about all these sinkholes that are appearing everywhere, especially in Russia.
They're a little bit different process. I don't think they're doing a lot of fracking in Russia, like as far as the natural gas. But we get them in Canada too, in the north. And what happens, I think, with those is you get underground pockets of natural gas and methane under the ground in bubbles under the ground. And then what happens is it provides a differential of charge potential. So coming up to the ground, it creates kind of a vortex, and it just warms the permafrost that's above, like, because in Canada, I'm sure Russia, Siberia is about the same altitude, same latitude. So you get about...
Can I tell you something I found really strange? When you get to places like Lithuania and even into Russia, even if they have really cold winters, they have really warm summers. They're hotter than us, and yet they're norther.
Yeah.
They're more north.
Yeah, they're short and they're hot, yeah.
Because I was a bit surprised to see holiday destinations there. I thought, oh, you wouldn't want to go, but they do. They all go to the beach. It's 30, 40 degrees. You think, how can that be when they're more north and you sort of associate Russia with more colder weather? So there you go.
Yeah, it's a short season, but it can still get pretty blistering hot. Canada's the same way up north. I mean, you get, summertime in Canada pushing 35 degrees up north. It only lasts for, 3 or 4 weeks. But it's hot, yeah, for sure.
It's just, I think what it is that because there is no North Pole and South Pole like they say, but if people just realise, like you've got Everest in a really hot country, but the mountains have got snow on them. The Alps are the same. France is quite hot. Then you've got the Alps, which is really cold, and then you've got Italy after it. But like, and Spain. But like for those bits, it's really cold. But there's warm land one side of it and warmer land the other side. So it's just the same thing, isn't it? It's just they've decided to call it the North Pole, haven't they?
Yeah. Yeah. Once you get into the electric side of it and start studying it from a perspective of electromagnetism, like a dynamo, and so the negative, wherever there's a negative charge tends to be colder, and wherever there's a positive charge will be the hot zones. So I think our weather is not, it definitely doesn't follow the globe model where it's high pressure zones and then it rises up and it cools and it flows. I mean, there is some natural convection and thermal dynamics involved as heat rises. I mean, that's pretty simple stuff. But the basic driver of it is actually reversed, right? When the electrics, say from the sun, makes a connection with the positives in the ground, well, it's actually the ground that's heating, right? More so probably than what the sun is emitting as photons. Because if you think about it logically, like the sun can come down on a snowpacked mountain or snowpack even in the wintertime. The sun can blaze down on that for a day and only melt it maybe an inch into the snowpack, and then you'll end up, even in the summertime, the sun only penetrates the ground. Like in Canada, we have permafrost. They call it permafrost for a reason, right? It's permanently frozen, and the sun only penetrates, in some places, 2-3 feet. That's as deep as the radiation from the sun actually gets. So the heat is actually coming from the ground up, right? As it tries to meet with the electrics in the sun. So it seems to be reversed in a lot of cases. I think the majority of the heat comes from the Earth itself, right? That's part of an electric circuit. So people want to focus on understanding how all this works, and just look for fulgurates from electric arcs, and you'll see pictures that look like this. I mean, even modern day lightning strikes, when I see stuff like this, I instantly think, well, there's the Siberian mountains and Grand Canyon and all the lakes and rivers, especially the ones that flow north, right? They flow opposite of the equator, which also debunks the globe completely, because in theory it's been involved. There shouldn't be any rivers and lakes that flow away from the equator. They all should flow respectively towards the equator, just because of centrifugal force. This here is just where a modern day lightning strike hit a chunk of concrete, like in a sidewalk, right? Can make connection with rebar on a sidewalk. Blast.
Today, sorry, just say hello, series. Hello, series.
No, my internet was apparently dropped out.
Oh no. Okay then. Anyway, hello, series. Are these things being made today, Chris?
Yeah, this one here is fairly recent, from what I gather. Like this one here is on a beach. So people take pictures of these things all the time. This is actually where lightning strike.
We're looking at the map.
Sand,
Are you showing something else? Are you showing something else,
Okay, here,
Chris?
I'll go back over that. Yeah, I gotta do that again then. Stop sharing. I'll jump into something else. Let me know. I mean, I might switch talking on a topic and not have the pictures to match. Keep me in line for sure.
That's it. You're there now.
All right. Yeah, so this is where, someone in their travels, the lightning hit the beach. It's not a jellyfish, it's actually glass.
It looks like one.
It looks like a jellyfish, yeah. Well, and then now you start to see, okay, well, this is what's interesting about it, is the jellyfish are formed based on, really basic electric distribution.
Yeah.
Their actual body shape takes on the most natural shape for the environment that they're in, and which makes sense, right? If you're in water and you're a buoyant jellyfish object made of single cellular with no skeletal anything, if your body grew in a fashion that was balanced with the electric phase of the water that you're in, then you can move around more efficiently. So kind of one leads to the other. So, it's interesting. So I find it fascinating that the lightning hits the sand, which is full of salt and water, and it makes like a jellyfish out of glass, right? Just two and two go together. And here's one that this is another one, Nemo's.
The fourth or the third?
That one actually might be an actual living creature. I'm trying to look for the ones that are actually lightning strikes that look like living creatures. They're really cool. If you find them, you'll find lots of them. Like here's one that was a lightning strike. So what happened was the lightning hit the ground first, made the fulgurate out of the sand, and fused it into a sculpture type of thing. Looks like a sand sculpture, but this is actually a
Wow.
Fused sand that was fused by lightning. And then it just.
That's quite tough. Yeah, is that just sand then?
Yeah, it's sand that was hit by lightning recently. So the lightning hit the sand and pulled the sand up and then fused it into this sculpture. And people take pictures of them all the time, right? Fulgurates, sand.
Wow.
Some of them are quite huge, eh?
Yeah. Look at that one.
Yeah. I like this one because it actually bends over back on itself. Looks like a snake or whatever coming out of the ground.
Dragons out of the ground.
Like dragons, yeah.
Yeah.
That square one in the left bottom of the rose.
This one's I can't read it whether or not it's in Spanish, but this one might be someone trying to make it because there's a bucket laying there. I'm not sure, so I wasn't sure if that was someone made that one or if it was actually found that way. I don't know. But this one's definitely a fulgurate. Yeah, maybe I don't know. I can't read it. Maybe if anybody
Do you think there's a connection here, or it's just coincidence and they look alike then?
Oh, I think it's 100% connection. Yeah.
You do? Oh wow.
Yeah, 100%. Oh yeah. Just the natural process, like the way trees grow, they follow electric charge distribution. So the roots in trees, flowers, everything follows the same electric patterns. And I think once we figure them out, we figure out how the charge distributes itself based on its chemistry, right? The bonds in the hydrogen atoms, they tend to form different shapes. Can't find the
Cool. Just
one
when
there,
you
which
think
would be
there's nothing
cool.
else to learn, there's more to learn.
Always more to learn, yeah. Yeah, so this is partly the interesting ones, right? So it depends on the charge, right? So you can see that in this area there was a positive charge and the area was pulled
You're
up.
showing loads of pictures, Chris. I don't know if you need to change the picture again. Sorry.
Yeah, it's updated.
Maybe take a second to catch it up here. Yeah, so the second picture from the left on the top there, where my little hand is pointing, the positive charge makes the peaks, and then sometimes the positive charge, as it makes the peaks, will dig a line down the center of the peaks, and then it fills in with water. So that's how you end up with areas like the Grand Canyon where the plains that are outside of it are lower than the Grand Canyon, but yet where the river runs down the middle ends up being deeper than everything. So first it raises
Chris, I'm not
up.
sure if the chat room can see it. I can just see your icon in the chat room.
Here, I'll stop sharing and redo it.
Oh, I see it. No, it's okay. It's okay. It's there. It's there. So sorry. It's just, it was an icon and sorry.
There's an update.
That's all right. That's all right. I'll go back here. I'll go back to this one. Yeah, these are pretty small pictures. I didn't zoom in on them or take them down to bring them up as examples. But there, so you can see that as the electricity travels, right, it digs out and then it makes veins off the side like roots on a tree. But first it digs out and then the water comes in after. Which is why, like I was saying, you get places like the Grand Canyon where the plains are lower and then there's a raised region going into the canyon, and then the canyon is actually in the center of the highest point, but it's deeper than everything else because it's first the land raises up in the electric field, and then the charge digs into the center of the vein where the electric path is the shortest and then pulls everything else out. And I'll just look up the Grand Canyon because there's some interesting shots I wanted to show you of that too. The Grand Canyon here. Put images. Now this place comes under debate once in a while too. Find a good picture here.
It's interesting that Angel last night said that, the Grand Canyon was made in minutes again, like you thought it had been.
Yeah, I agree. It happened in mere minutes.
Yeah, you can see here all the peaks, all the little peaks below.
Yeah, so these peaks here they're not identical, but they are very like these tower ones, especially like they're freestanding towers type of idea. So this is almost identical, not exactly identical because it's different type of rock, but it's similar. I mean, it's sandstone and granite and different types of minerals. But generally speaking, this type of a tower setup is the same as what we saw in Cappadocia. Right, so the electricity came in and just removed everything else and left these ones as freestanding, stabilized zones. So as the electricity enters the ground, it stabilizes it because it gives it force and charge around a column. Then everything else gets disrupted and gets blown out of the ground and sucked up into the air. And some of the characteristics of the canyon that's probably a pain.
All these grooves.
Look at those colours in there.
So 100 meters deep or something.
Oh yeah, it's huge. I'm trying to find a good picture that really shows the debris fields here. But maybe this one will. This one looks okay. I'll let this one update for. So the common theory is that there were lakes to the north, and basically after the ice age or whatever, the lakes were full, and then it busted open and it came down and washed all this out. But I do have a bit of an issue with that because there's no evidence of any water erosion anywhere in the canyon except for where the water flows still to this day within the first couple hundred feet where the river flows, and it's lower now than it was, but I think the water line is, within a couple hundred feet of the bottom, depending on where you're at in the canyon. But you can see how vast the canyon is, and all the terraces. So each terrace is essentially a distribution of charge potential. So you can count it as, there was this much energy, then this much energy, and that was taken out in one fell swoop based on the charge. And then you can see how there's a peak and then there's a pile of debris. right? So this is all smashed up rock on top of the layer below. And then this layer here is again covered with debris from the one that was above. So as it was pulled out, the debris fell back down and then filled in the layers. Right? Because it's not like these have been collapsing, you know, down and down and down and down. I'm sure they probably do to some extent, but not to this degree where even the most high layers have debris on top of them. So the highest is still covered in smaller rocks, a lot of it, like just millions and millions and millions of pounds of stone on the top. The very highest peak.
I suppose I never really looked at it like that before. But you always look at everything differently now, don't you? Now you realise that it's not what it's supposed to be, or there's something else to it.
Yeah. Well, you see how it was tore out in sheer squares. Like it was actually, then these little angular spots is actually smaller rocks and debris. It was big chunks of iron and magnetite came from somewhere else.
Oh, you mean they've been dumped there?
A good way to look at it.
That's been dumped there, you mean? It wasn't there and it came through all these strikes?
Yeah, it seems also you would have several working
at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the center of the arc force, so imagine the biggest lightning bolt you can think of, came ripping down through the center and tore everything up and out, blew everything all apart, but it brought it, as it tore it up, it made these sheer cliffs, which would be square, and then these angle parts on the shelves that are filled in, so all this is loose material that's been filled in after, so it was dumped in from the top down and then fell back down in, and then the water came in after and washed out. So it's actually reverse of what you think it is, because even the highest peaks, like way up here on the top, have all these small rocks and stones on the top. On the very highest one, it's still covered in debris, like all the way up to the top. And each one of these layers is coated in debris. So it's the reverse of what you think it is. And the rocks that are on the top are the more iron-rich dolomite stones, and they're the ones that were the hottest. So they went up into the air, were heated, and then fell back down as a different form of rock. In some cases, like this is red sandstone, and then all the heavier iron rocks and rich rocks are on the top. So it was completely flipped upside down.
Mm.
But the scale is the problem, right? People, it's hard to get your head around the scale, of what happened. All right, the sheer scale of it just blows your mind. There's lots of peaks in the Grand Canyon that are similar to Devil's Tower too, like these freestanding types of peaks and valleys. But you see how it looks like a debris field, right? So it looks like you went in there with a mining operation and dug it out, right? And then the rubble is from the mining operation. Right? It does look like that. I mean, if you compare that picture to a modern mine, well, it's pretty close. It would look pretty close. But there's no circular gouging. It's all square-faced. So it was actually just tore out and then dumped back on top of itself.
Just like the lightning.
Like a lightning strike, yeah. And what's interesting is that you can see the different colors. So you have a base of sandstone, more like sandstone and red iron oxides. And then so that was pulled up and out. And the stuff that fell back down is more gray and more of a dielectric material. I don't know exactly what it is because I haven't gone there and actually tested it.
Chris, what do you think about the pyramids they think are there then? People say
I don't know, I haven't seen them. I haven't seen them. That'd be more for Angel, but I haven't seen the pyramids that are there, whether they're natural or if they're naturally formed and people dug into them for shelter. I don't know.
Yeah, all their cities.
There are some cliffs here, though, and I do know that there are cliffs in the Grand Canyon that are considered sacred cliffs that are built by the And there's actually caves in the sides of the mountains that were remains up there, similar to what we saw in Cappadocia. And they say they're built, I think, or something. I don't know the exact legend, but let's just do Cliff Caves, Grand Canyon, Cliff Caves, and see if we can find it by Grand
I
Canyon.
think you might have to represent again, Chris. I think your icon's showing in the chat room.
Okay.
I don't know if they saw that, to be honest.
Here.
That's really annoying you've got to do that every time.
Yeah, it seems when I change the tab, it kicks me out of the presented.
I think you'll have to explain that a bit again, because I don't think the chat room saw any of that.
Not sure.
No one said anything, but I just can only see your icon.
All right, so here we go back to. I just want to show you. I'll show you the caves, and then I can go back and talk about that other again.
Okay.
So this, if you want to search for this, people can do this themselves as well. So just go Grand Canyon Cliff Caves, and you'll come up with all kinds of images of caves that are in the Grand Canyon area. And there's many of them that are inaccessible. Some of these have paths going in, so they were occupied later. But some of them are so high that you can't even get to them. So there's legends that they were built by sky people, that type of thing. But they're way up. These ones are actually in Nepal. So there's thousands of man-made caves, 155 feet from the ground, lie hidden within the. You don't see this guy trying to climb to it with a block and tackle, right? He's mountain climber trying to get to them to see what's in them. So that kind of tells you that, well, there was an entrance at some point that was on top, and then they built into the mountain, and then into the ground. It would have been a flat plain probably when they dug in and built their cities, and then it was ripped up and left part of it behind. And now there's no entrance to get into them anymore because it was taken away with the blast. These are the ancient caves in Nepal.
Amazing.
And this is like. Yeah, so the Grand Canyon is one area, Nepal is another area. There's lots of them. Where's these ones here? Mountain cave.
Are they like the other ones where there's no steps up to them, but it's all up there and you can't get to it?
Exactly.
You have to go like
there's,
them.
There's no. Yeah, you pretty much either go in there with a mountain climbing or you go in there with a helicopter, right? There's no way to get to it.
Oh, it looks like that's been cut. That picture at the top looks like it's been covered in sort of silt.